Your votes have dumped Grace and Frankie, leaving one islander absolutely devastated.
Oh shit, I have a YouTube channel.
Picture this, the year is 2022. The Fiends have been getting a somewhat steady supply of Batman-related products after the Arkham series wrapped up. But the fans needed more, so when October hit, they were given Gotham Knights, a game that centers around Bruce's underlings after the big schizo himself bit the big one. It was quickly discarded by players. Now, unlike the other poorly received games that came out around the same time, I don't remember seeing the same kind of backlash with Gotham Knights. You know, the kind of backlash that could jumpstart a YouTube career. Oh no, not mine. I guess I'm at the part where I'm supposed to be doing this for the love of the game and not for a sponsorship with Raid Shadow Legends. However, I saw a couple of videos that picked Gotham Knights against Arkham Knight. I would like to remind you that there is a 7-year gap between these two games. I think it's important to note that this is not an Arkhamverse installment, but it was made by the guys who finished Arkham Origins, WB Games Montreal. Apparently Rocksteady was too busy putting the finishing touches on Arkham Knight's tank controls. Time well spent. So today we'll take a look at Gotham Knights and see why it was quickly tossed in the Basuda after release. We're also going to bring up the critically acclaimed Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League a couple of times. Just enough to massage the algorithm, but not enough to make me re-download the game, because I'm only human. Now let's get into it. Gotham Knights starts with Batman getting his ass rocked by a masked assassin, who turns out to be Ra's al Ghul, the vampire dude who excels at dying and coming back to life. Then again, that's most DC characters, so that doesn't really describe him that well. Now, if you've played this game before, this is probably the part where you notice that there's something a little off with the Dark Knight.
You don't need that mask. I know it's you.
Yeah, he sounds a little chunky. Pause. I gotta say, it's really weird hearing somebody not named Kevin Conroy voice Batman. And it's not just him, the entire A-Team roster has been replaced with, well, I'll call it the B-Team, but I have no idea who these guys are. Let's see here, we got Sloane Seagal, okay. America Young, wait, isn't that the name of Miss Marvel or something? Oh, and there's Gildert Jackson. You think he's out here named Gildert, bro? That's crazy. Fortunately, their performances aren't terrible, and most of the characters here aren't known for their iconic voice actors. Seriously, I probably wouldn't have noticed if it wasn't for Batman sounding like he gargled 4 bottles of Maltagoya. Speaking of the Cape Crusader, he's still getting his ass beat by Ra's al Ghul. Batman puts up a good fight though. He was even able to send a distress signal to the Bat Kids, and then he thought, what if I blew this bitch up? Wait, what? Okay, wait a minute. Now I know that Ra's al Ghul gets resurrected every other day, but I don't think Batman would be cool with killing him though. I know he wants to destroy all the Batcave tech, but I don't think the vampire dude cares for that stuff. I'm pretty sure he's trying to kill Batman just for the love of the game. Which reminds me. Yeah, that boy is dead, and you know exactly where I'm gonna go with this, so I'll just come out and say it. This Batman death easily clears the Batman death in Suicide Squad. His assailant was shown to be a believable threat, he respectfully passed the torch, and he went out in his shield. Just look at how this cutscene was directed. Throughout the fight, each piece of his suit was taken off, signaling that this is the end for him on some Final Fantasy Crisis Core shit, and at the end of it, shit is exploding and he's still throwing hands with Ra's al Ghul. It's not absolute cinema, but it got the job done. Juxtapose that with Arkham Batman, and well, he gets his ass kicked by 4 dorks, forced to sit through a yapping session, then shot in the head by Joker's ex-girlfriend and left to rot in a park bench. Gotham Knights wins easily in this department, but let's see what else is better in the story. Hey, remember that distress signal that Batman sent? Well, it successfully got to his Batman University alumni. The 4 parkour their way through the ruins and find his body in the rubble. Guys, I know this is supposed to be serious, but in execution, this is unintentionally one of the funniest scenes ever. First of all, why is Jayson holding back Tim from Batman's corpse? Normally when character A is being physically held back, it's because character B is trying to stop character A from being compromised. But in this situation, there's no danger. It's just Bruce dead on the floor. I mean, what's Tim gonna do, kiss him? He's not even gay, shit. And then he puts his hands on his head like CJ. Also, I just noticed that nobody's crying. I don't think these dudes are taking his situation seriously. Regardless, the 4 retrieve his body and attend the funeral. After the service, they revisit the grave and discuss how they're gonna move forward as a team, allowing us to select which Bat-Kid we want to play as. This is also the best time to do a quick rundown of the playable characters. Starting with Richard Grayson, when his parents got clapped, Bruce took him under his bat wing. When his tenure as the first Robin was finished, he became Nightwing. Next we have Jayson Todd. In his backstory, Bruce found him trying to steal the tires off his whip while it was parked at the same spot where Thomas and Martha Wayne got shot and thought, that's Robin right there. That's also a double entendre. I totally meant to do that. At some point, Joker thought it would be funny to blow up a teenager and did just that. Later on, Ra's al Ghul grabbed his reboot card and revived him in the Lazarus Pit. After being revived, he had an epiphany. What if we just start killing people? Red Hood is reborn. Up next is Barbara Gordon. She saw Batman hop around in some tights and thought she could do that too. Joker took exception to that and shot her ass. I'm noticing a pattern here. She was paralyzed for some time until she became the $6 million woman. Last but not least, we have Tim Drake. All I have to say about him is that you have to give the Arkhamverse credit for making him look distinguishable from the other Robins. Yeah, honestly, I didn't grow up consuming a lot of media that involved Timmy. Nonetheless, these are the Gotham Knights, and based on the game's reception, that's all we're getting in terms of playable characters. Tragic. But among these four, it seems like one of these things is not like the other. Hey Red Hood, aren't you known for killing people? Yes, the answer is yes, but Gotham Knights had already thought of that, and they have an explanation. Basically, Jayson toned down the edginess once he got closer to the Bat family, and his guns, well, they're non-lethal rounds. Don't worry, these won't kill you! That kinda turns me off from playing as him, so I guess I'll start off as somebody else. Luckily, I'm a big fan of... Nightwing is one of my favorite heroes, so it works out. I mean, even if he wasn't, I'd still choose him because both Batgirl and Robin decided to show up with the worst starter fits in the history of video games. Bro's wearing a sleeveless, oversized hoodie, Chicano style, with a cape, and she's wearing assault mode dish gloves, Caterpillar Timbs, and she grew bat ears for good measure. Awful. Absolutely appalling. If I was Batman, I would have blown up the Batcave a long time ago so nobody would have to see those costumes. So Nightwing it is. The four are picking up a case that Batman was working on before he died, and we traveled to a university to look for a man named Kirk Langstrom. But when we oh my goodness, what the hell is this locomotion? I feel like I'm walking with beer goggles on. Anyways, that Langstrom dude is dead, so we decided to snoop around for clues. Starting with his office, where the game introduces AR targeting, which is basically the scanning feature that many open world games have. There's also an investigation minigame where we look at the crime scene and try to solve it by selecting the relevant clues. It reinforces the detective aspect that Batman and his kids are known for, so I consider it a nice touch despite it being basic. Speaking of basic, when we recover the hard drive, we're thrown into a showcase of the stealth and combat, and without going into detail, don't worry, I'll talk about it later, it's really simplistic. I'll tell you what, at least it's not terrible. What is terrible, however, is the bike controls, which pisses me off because you get a whole cutscene that makes it look so cool and shit, but as soon as you gain control, you realize it's like steering a refrigerator with two wheels on the bottom. You know, I've never played Ride to Hell Retribution, don't think I ever will, so these are the worst bike controls I've ever had the displeasure to experience. There's not even a turbo boost option. You know what game has turbo boost? Saints Row 2. Shit, the bike controls are also better, and that shit dropped before the Obama administration. Matter of fact, I don't know if you guys do this already, but whenever you're playing one of these open world games, use Saints Row 2 as the bar. Trust me, you'd be surprised how many products fail to reach that standard. And I won't do it in this video, but I can tell you right now that Gotham Knights is off to a bad start. Back to the story, the gang sets up their HQ in a bell tower with a little help from Alfred. While he's putting the finishing touches, the gang decides to sneak into the Gotham City Police Department to touch up on Langstrom's body. And when I say gang, I mean just Nightwing while the other three are on the radio, because solo and two-player co-op are the only ways you can play the story mode. I would say that this is giving me Agents of Mayhem flashbacks, but at least in that game you can switch characters while patrolling. To make things more confusing, there is a game mode where you can have all four knights throwing hands, but no AI though. Geez, even Suicide Squad was able to have CPU partners, and I highly doubt that it takes that much effort to implement. Regardless, Nightwing sneaks into the GCPD with his homies yapping on comms. When we reach the morgue, we find Talia cooking up her dad extra well done.
Even a Lazarus Pit has some limits.
So that's it for Ra's al Ghul, by the way. I totally thought that he would be the big bad guy of the story that we would have to take down, but whatever. After we find more clues as to who killed Langstrom, we meet up with Talia again. She tells us that the League of Shadows aren't cool with her anymore, and they're gonna pull up to Gotham City for reasons that we're not 100% sure of yet. And due to that uncertainty, we unfortunately have to ask Harley Quinn for help. At least the voice actress in this game gave a less annoying performance than Tara Strong and Kill the Justice League.
Sharky's a freak who'll never be a real boy, and what was it? Oh yeah, I never was too bright.
Nightbutt, you came. Oh, but look at you. You're getting all skinny. You gotta eat. Wouldn't want you to lose them glitz.
See, the key is to not over-exaggerate the New York accent to the point that the player blurts out something anti-Semitic as a knee-jerk reaction. We visit Harley at the Blackgate Penitentiary, where she tells us that she worked with Batman in the past to figure out who the villain of the week is. It turns out that she kept all of her findings in a book, and she's willing to hand it over if we participate in a wild goose chase. When we come back, she keeps her end of the bargain and hands us the book. Kind of. This is Harley Quinn we're dealing with, and that means unnecessary fuckeries around the corner. In this case, she straps the book to a balloon that's powered by alchemy. Seriously, it's whipping around corners like it has a mind of its own. Also, I just realized that Nightwing lets the balloon do its thing instead of, I don't know, shoot projectiles at it. You could have saved a lot of time, my guy. Whatever. After a fight in the prison yard, we finally get the book, and it's filled with schizo shit. Also, Harley escaped. Great, can't wait to see that wonderful character again. Around this time, we unlock unique modes of transportation for each playable character. Nightwing gets a Fortnite glider, Batgirl gets a bigger cape to glide like Batman, Robin uses technology from the Justice League to teleport, and Red Hood prances in the sky with his undead abilities. Wow, these Canucks started reaching badly towards the end there. For whatever reason, these abilities vary in speed without much upside in other areas. Nightwing's glider is the only one that's not annoying to use. Not only is it the fastest out of the four, but it also has the most longevity. Batgirl, on the other hand, has to climb the Burj Khalifa just to utilize the dive and glide combo properly. Robin's teleporter has a time limit, and the cursor takes a long ass time to move, but hey, at least you can use it multiple times in the air. And Red Hood's spooky hop is just cheeks. Bro, look at him. This guy used to kill people. Luckily, there are fast travel locations around the map. One might think that this is a good solution to the issue, but think about it. Saints Row 2, I lied, didn't need fast travel. This is effectively a band-aid over a gash. Now, before we get back to the main story, we should take a look at the side cases. Why, you might ask? Well, I took a look at my notes for the rest of the main story and realized that despite taking a couple days to finish, I only have half a page of information that's worth mentioning. For reference, the story portion of my Kill the Justice League video had 10 pages of notes. So we're gonna do a little padding. Let's start with Harley Quinn. That's right, after helping Batman and later his sidekicks, she gave up being a good guy in record time and became Gwyneth Paltrow. For real, she's basically a goop saleswoman, selling healing bracelets, supplements, and pussy rocks.
Gently insert the egg into your vagina, like you would a tampon, the slightly larger side of—
Stop! Harley's scheme can be easily boiled down to, you've played Agents of Mayhem, right? Yeah, I thought so. So, the SpongeBob movie? Yeah, so she's mind controlling her audience by using a remote, I think? Something about using implants and being given to her devotee. Look, I wasn't listening. What did catch my attention was a boss fight. During the scrap, I realized something. Harley has hands. Why does she have hands? Bro, she's toting a sledgehammer like Triple H and beating ass with hyper armor. As far as I know, there's no story reason as to why she's now strong enough to give one or two knights some trouble. For some reason, she's just built different. Guys, this is the 4th time I've seen Harley Quinn receive an unnecessary buff in a story that ranges between shit and mediocre. Look, I didn't read the recent Detective Comics, and judging by the sales, there's a good chance that you didn't either, but to the guys who've read it, is this how she is combat-wise? I don't know. I've always thought that she was known for her agility rather than her brute force power, and yet here she is with a 3-stage boss fight holding her own against the Bat Kids. Of course she loses, but my goodness, I wonder if the other 2 side cases are as strange as this. They are. However, they're not as interesting as Harley's, and let's be real, that's not a high bar to clear. Mr. Freeze turns into a Gundam and Clayface does film puns. That's really it. Cool, now we can get back to the main story. Back at the HQ, the 4 concluded that the Penguin might be our next guy to talk to, and after beating the shit out of his guards, he tells us that Langstrom's death is tied to the Court of Owls, a super secret society that runs Gotham from the shadows. While that's happening, Alfred meets up with Jacob Kane, Bruce's uncle, to talk about old people stuff in the middle of the crosswalk. We infiltrate the Court of Owls hideout where we encounter their faction of enemies. Wait, I forgot to introduce the different factions beforehand. Okay, so as of now, there's the Regulators, the Mob, and the Freaks. Alright, there we go. After following the blood trail, we're caught in a trap. Think you need to work on your reaction time there, Dick. A bunch of owl dudes show up, and then an old guy with a cooler mask shows up, and then, wait a minute. That's Jacob Kane. You can tell by the neck wrinkles. Guys, maybe you should have had him wearing a turtleneck or something so the big reveal can't be ruined. Okay, botched reveal aside, this is a bit underwhelming. Jacob Kane is not a physically imposing guy, and he's also not that interesting of a character. So unless there's some secret owl mystic powers or Bane level steroids, I'm gonna be more disappointed than I already am. Let's pretend that we don't know it's Jacob until he reveals himself, and then we'll act surprised, alright? So the cooler owl mask guy starts yapping, and then he drops Nightwing into North Korea's Ninja Warrior course. After hitting the red button, we find the competitors who failed the track, stare in horror, and bounce. At some point, Robin, I switched to Robin by the way, meets up with Talia, who's currently in the middle of clapping her own League of Shadows homies. I guess they really don't like her like that anymore. She tells us that the beef between the Court of Owls and the League of Asses will stack a bunch of bodies in Gotham City, and then dips. Very productive conversation there. Anyways, the Knights decide to sneak into a masquerade ball after hearing that the Court of Owls will be there.
Please, 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 nobody see him, nobody see him, please, nobody see him.
And they saw me.
Fuck!
Wait, how do they see
How do
me?
they see
What the
you?
fuck?
The head owl guy takes off his mask and oh my god, it's Jacob Kane. What? Kane tells us that he knew that Bruce used to run around in a bat costume. He's also aware of the identity of the Knights, but kept it to himself out of respect for Martha Wayne. He explains that he has the same goal that Bruce had, but with different ideas of reaching them. We, of course, disagree with his methods, and the League does as well, which explains the whole surprise attack thing going on. And that gives the Knights and Kane the opportunity to skedaddle. And when we rendezvous at the bell tower, the Knights bring in GCPD detective Renee Montoya to help apprehend Jacob. And if you don't know who Miss Montoya is, well, she was molded into a perfect hand-me-down character by the time her mentor Vic Sage kicked the bucket. You see, this is a Dominican woman who enjoys the company of other women. In the mind of the average comic book writer, it would be a great idea to have her become the new Question, because apparently you guys love this kind of stuff. I mean, Japan is kicking her ass with their own medium, but hey, Miles Morales got it.
Miles Morales' Ultimate Spider-Man number 11 sold 29,100.
Okay, maybe not in that
Back when the
department, but the
comic-
movies are hitting. Now that deserves its own video. In this game, she's just filling the Jim Gordon position since he's dead, so I might have digressed a little bit during that whole character origin spiel. Regardless, the Knights introduced her to the HQ without their costumes to build trust, and she was able to identify all four of them by their shoot names in record time. I'll allow it. The plan is simple. One Knight infiltrates Kane's big red building via rooftop, while the GCPD hangs around street level until we get the job finished. Jeez, it's like Batman never died. When we finally reach Jacob Kane, he puts up little resistance and gives up easily. Kinda sucks, I was really hoping for him to pull an Uncle Iroh, but whatever. We hand off Jacob to the GCPD and he couldn't even make it past 2 minutes.
Jacob! Jacob!
For those who are wondering who clipped Jacob, it was Talia. That whole "I'm not with the League of Assassins anymore" bit was actually a ruse. She only said that to help push the Knights towards taking out the Owl Boys. Wait, that one time when she called us over for a chat, she was in the middle of slicing up her own homies. I even checked their vitals, they're all dead. What's the rationale behind that? Because it looks like a plot oversight. But at least she's more threatening than Jacob, although that's just on a relative scale. Objectively speaking, she's a small step above Wile E. Coyote. Either way, we're at the last leg of the story, so let's see how Gotham Knights wraps this whole thing up. We track down Talia in the Batcave ruins, and she is a hat away from a blatant case of gimmick infringement. It's Moose! By the way, this is the MacGuffin that the story is built around. It can't be a League of Assassins / Shadows story without the Lazarus Pit, and Talia used it to revive Batman so the two can become the new leaders of the group. The Nightwing disagrees, which leads to a boss fight with Batman himself. I do have to say, it is a little underwhelming doing this mission without all four of the Knights present. But I will also say that it is hilarious that we have to press X to appeal to Bruce during the ass whooping. I'm having flashbacks to a game that I never even played before. After knocking the Lazarus out of Bruce, we set our sights on Talia for the final fight. In the middle of all that, the Court of Owls shows up with a new leader. Who is he, you might be asking? Well, one, that's not revealed to us, and two, it wouldn't even matter anyway, considering that the story ends in less than 2 minutes with no sequel in sight. Oh, Talia is defeated, and instead of paying for her actions, she dips, never to be seen again.
Okay.
The Owl Boys rush for the pit, and Nightwing tries his best to fight back. Gee, if only there were 3 other vigilantes that could be of service. Oh well, Batman hops into the Batwing, says his goodbyes to the homies, and gives his life to Allah so nobody can use the Lazarus Pit ever again, dying for the second time via explosion. Nightwing gets on Gotham Live to give a speech that I wasn't really paying attention to, something about keeping the city safe no matter what, I bet. A final Batman tribute plays and the credits roll. Cool, now that that's over with, we can get to the next section to hear my thoughts on the story and the gameplay. As far as the story goes, it's average, starting with the
Positives.
Batman didn't go out like a bitch. He threw hands with one of his rivals and went out on his own terms. Even his second death was handled well, coming back to life, giving his seal of approval, and then peace out as a way to build up the Knights was okay. The trope has already worn out its welcome, but at least there's respect for him, and it also ends up giving the Knights a couple of character points. And speaking of those guys, I don't hate them. I don't love them either, but compared to the last collection of ensembles that I had to deal with, I'm grateful. There's nothing really intricate going on, and that's because of how the gameplay and the story is structured. We'll talk about that later. Though each Bat Kid is given a handful of cutscenes for the sake of character development. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what's going on in all of them. Something about a dollhouse, people cooking food, and Jayson playing Just Dance. I'm gonna pretend like I didn't see that. But at least there's an attempt to add depth to these guys, and it doesn't get enough job showing what their motivation and struggles are. As for the positives I have for the co-op in the story, it does its job well for the most part. The homie Felix and I went through it without much issue. It's all just a matter of scaling the enemies correctly, but a good job nonetheless. And the side cases had good boss fights. Yeah, that's it for all the positives I have for the game. I guess we could switch over to the negatives in the story. Starting with the antagonists, they're extremely mid. The Court of Owls seemed a bit interesting at first, but as soon as the game made it clear that there wasn't much of a big plan with them, I stopped caring. To be exact, it was around this point.
I'm not the one wearing the mask.
Kinda difficult material to work with here. Oh, and also this part. Suddenly, all the momentum that the Owls had was taken away in one quick moment, and it was all done to put Talia and her assassins in the spotlight, which didn't work. Mainly because it was done in the last quarter of the story, so there's not a lot of time to let the twist settle, though the betrayal itself is a little half-baked. The average backstab should at least motivate you to get your lick back. In this case, when Talia sniped Owlman, I said to myself, well, I guess I have to take her down. I mean, prior to the assassination, Talia was just popping in only a handful of times before fully turning heel. Maybe if she had more screen time where she was helping the Knights, I would have cared a little more, especially around the final encounter. And how about that ending to the boss fight? We beat her ass, she dips, and we're left with some dude who calls himself the new head of the Owl Gang while Batman works on blowing himself up. Goofiness aside, it's not fulfilling. It doesn't even look like it was building towards a sequel. It's as if the deadline for the story was the next day at high noon. Now, if you were aware of what was going on in early 2024, / if you've watched my Kill the Justice League video, then you probably know about Sweet Baby Inc. And yes, 2 of the writers who worked on this game were SBI people. However, I didn't see too many crazy moments that are often associated with those weirdos. Although there was an email that talked about Dick and Tim going to a Diddy parade. Also, one of the Radiant Quest givers talking about her wife or something. And one could throw Renee Montoya into the sus category, since she doesn't prove why she's worthy of taking Jim Gordon's character role. Honestly, if they had spent more time adding depth to her character, I wouldn't have much of an issue with this. But that's really it. The story overall has more of an issue with it feeling unfinished and unfulfilling rather than a big gay stream agenda that other SBI affiliated games are accused of having. Speaking of unfinished and unfulfilling, let's talk about the gameplay. And to start, it's unfinished enough. Outside of the combat, we're thrown into a map that has a couple of interesting spots, but they get lost in an environment that reminds me of Steelport from Saints Row 3. I know Gotham isn't known for being vibrant and colorful, but at least try to make it feel it isn't as hollow as it is. There are also too many instances where animations will repeat as if they're not expecting you to stick around and watch. I know a lot of players wouldn't even notice that kind of shit, but it's worth mentioning because attention to detail is important. Otherwise, I start asking questions like, how much burning toilet paper do these prisoners have? And how long will this freak rider bat? And when's Richard gonna stop stretching? These instances, albeit small, feed into the repetitive nature of the game. It gives you the idea that there's not much going on. As for the combat itself, well, let's break it down. When you're trying to be stealthy, you can duck walk around and do silent takedowns. Some animations will take more time, sometimes your character will throw in a quip out loud, and most of the time your target will make "I'm getting choked out" noises. But as long as nobody else is looking at you, you'll be fine. And for whatever reason you think being stealthy is for pickle smoochers, you can start a fight by doing an ambush takedown, or you can run in and duff a guy in the face. Either way, you're fighting, and here's what's at your disposal. First, you have your light strikes. If you hold the button longer, it turns into a heavy strike. Then you have your range attack. The same rules apply. If some dude tries to hit you, you can press the circle button to dodge. Sometimes you can perform counters if you dodge at the right time and tap the strike button. The more hits you land on your ops, the more that bar over there fills up, and you can use that bar to activate one of your 7 momentum abilities. Or 6 in my case whenever I use Batgirl Batgirl since I've yet to unlock her last ability because the challenge requires me to defeat enemies with her ult, and that becomes a 3rd degree doo-doo stain on the hardest difficulty, and I don't feel like lowering it. Not being a pussy has its drawbacks. Since I brought it up prematurely, I might as well talk about it. All 4 of the knights have their own ultimate abilities. Batgirl has a drone that heals homies and shoots enemies when it feels like it. Nightwing has a dome of friendship. Robin has nanomachines. That never gets old. And Red Hood pulls a McCree. No, not that. They're all pretty underwhelming, to the point that I end up forgetting about it on many occasions. Just like most PvE-focused games, Gotham Knights has a skill tree system that helps separate each of the Bat Kids. The ones for Batgirl, Robin, and Nightwing work well, but Red Hood kinda gets a shitty deal. I do find it hilarious that Batgirl gets the ability to self-revive instead of the guy who legit pulled a Jesus. Moving on, the game also has the typical gear system where your suits and weapons are acquired through a crafting system where you use indistinguishable materials that you get from beating up people. You can beef the gear up by using mod chips, which are acquired through throwing hands. Both the mod chips and the gear vary in rarity from common to heroic, so you can pretty much see what the cycle outside the story is here. Go outside, beat up the bad guys / save civilians, report back to the bell tower to upgrade, and repeat. Sure, there are time trials and collectibles scattered around the city, but it's not nearly enough to keep your interest in the game high. The only kind of flair they added to the cycle is that you can interrogate your enemies to get more information on the big boy crimes. I mean, you don't really have to do them, but at least it's Batman-esque. The issue I have with this cycle, well, the main issue I have with it is that it heavily relies on the combat, and the combat in this game is nothing special. So you're basically grinding through mid-gameplay to earn gear that's not as memorable as it should be. Not to say that the legendary loot sucks, but the way you obtain them isn't really special. Like, remember in Destiny where you had to prepare extensively to fight Korra, and after beating his ass, you're rewarded with a bunch of cool shit? Well, in this game, after beating up X amount of jabronis, you can craft some legendary stuff. Again, unfulfilling. As a last-ditch effort, I tried to mess around with the heroic assault game mode, but it failed to keep me interested. And if you want to know what it's about, well, have you ever played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon? Yeah, basically there's X amount of floors, and each floor has a bunch of rooms where you complete missions. You're rewarded with random mod chips and material, which gave me little reason to continue playing. One point I want to talk about as far as the combat mechanics go has to do with the difficulty. See, I play on the hardest difficulty with New Game Plus. That's right, I played this game twice. I can pinky promise you that most of my deaths during my second playthrough were due to me getting sick of throwing 100 strikes at a beefy enemy, while another one is off screen shooting at you. Now, this is probably because Gotham Knights is a little indecisive on whether it wants to be a solo or a co-op game, but I assure you we'll talk about that later. However, the one time I did have trouble was in the last boss fight with Talia al Ghul. During my first playthrough, I whipped her shit like Ike Turner, but the second time around, the tables were turned. The first stage of the fight was not much of a cakewalk, but I got through it after a couple of tries. The second stage, however, was on some fuck shit. So remember how I talked about the countering system? Well, throw that out the window, because Talia would throw multiple long-range attacks that you can't counter. You know, countering one of the most efficient ways to beat an enemy's ass? Well, forget about that and say hello to running around like a bitch and praying that she won't beat the bricks off of you. It's just a confusing decision. The final boss fight should be the culmination of all the skills and techniques you acquired throughout the game being used. I'm expecting Yang from Sifu or the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3, not this. One last issue I want to talk about has to do with this game's identity crisis. Gotham Knights doesn't know if it wants to be a solo game or a co-op game. Yeah, you have the option to play both, but there are multiple points where the game's indecision damages the overall quality. Like I said before, the story won't feature all 4 of the knights throwing hands at the same time. You can only have up to 2 knights fighting with the other 2 on comms. Kinda weird considering that Alfred is right there. Come on now, 4 is better than 2. What's even weirder is that the majority of the cutscenes will only feature 1 Bat Kid. There will be moments where you see 2 of the knights in action, but only a handful of times. This ruins the flow of the story. For example, there is this one time where we visit the Penguin's office. Here you see Robin picking up his fat ass body and getting roofied. Seems pretty normal, right? However, I had Nightwing with me, but the game doesn't factor that in. So we go from Robin walking in solo and getting slept to Robin and Nightwing waking up in a nightmare wait, is this another nightmare sequence? This is the 3rd time I had to go through one of these scenarios where we had to explore the main character's deepest, darkest fears. What's up with these types of game developers and this trope? Anyways, I understand that constructing a cutscene for every combination of the knights would take a lot of time and effort, but I don't know, maybe you should have structured the game to involve all 4 of these guys with the ability to switch on the fly like GTA 5. This is the 9th console generation. It can't be that hard to have 3 AI teammates following you around.
Seamless transition.
Alright, time for the big question. Is Gotham Knights better than Suicide Squad? yes, although the gameplay is a toss-up, Gotham Knights' story is 100 times less offensive. Speaking of the Suicide Squad, what's going on with that game anyways? Suicide Squad killed the Justice League's next DLC character, Mrs. Freeze, alrighty, will also be a member of the lesbian. Never mind. In conclusion, Gotham Knights is mid. The story is nothing special and the gameplay is average. If you can find it for under $10, then knock yourself out. Alright, cool. I'm gonna go watch Love Island. I'll see you later.